Welcome to the SOB radio show, where we have fun, interesting guests, and hot topics. Each week, we offer insights into music, fashion, health, fitness, and humor. Do you have the perfect guest for us to interview? I want to know. Drop me a line on our Facebook page at Spunky Old Broad 1 or reach out to me on our website at spunkyoldbroad.com. And now, back to the show. Hi, everybody. This is Gayle Carson. And you know me from a variety of my shows, but I thought this morning and this afternoon and this evening, I would give you some hints about what it's like to be a professional speaker. And, this is something I have been doing forever. When I was in college, I studied speech and broadcasting and drama and all of that. And so I gave the equivalent of what was called 17 public appearances a week. I mean, that is really what I did. And so I got good there. I mean, it was just something you had to do if you wanted to stay in school and graduate with good grades. And there was a long, long time before I felt comfortable doing all of these things. But it was interesting because one of the best classes that I ever took was a class that was taught by a radio personality. And our homework and what we did much of, and I would recommend this to anybody who wants to be a speaker, is to get some baby books and take the part of all the characters. So that, for example, I was way down here when I was a heavy guy kind of person, and I was way up here when I was a little girl. And I took the parts of all these characters and also learned what it was like to have what's called meaningful words, where there was a presence just in the words, like thump. You wouldn't say thump, you'd say thump. You would say stop. You would say things like that. You would give the word itself emphasis because it was what was called a word that had emotion to it. So taking that class was just one, of course, many, but it was the one that had the most impact on me because it gave me such a world of experience in all these different voices. And when I actually started speaking, it just came very naturally for me to have all of this up and down and in between kind of voices, which kept the audience interested. Now, let me tell you what my first experience as a speaker was. When I went into business, as many of you know, I was very young. I was 21 years old, and I really didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I thought I did because, when you get out of college and you did well and everybody praised you, you thought, boy, I have the world by the tail. Well, of course, it's a whole different world when you move somewhere else and you go into a business and nobody knows you. So my first experience at speaking was actually to middle and high school kids because I had a career school and my clientele were really, because it was a charm and a modeling school that I started out with, really my primary students were anywhere from 13, 14 years old up to 17 or 18. So that was really my market. And as strange as it sounds, once I started speaking in the schools, they just really loved me. And the teachers felt very comfortable leaving me with the class. I mean, because they knew I wouldn't have the disciplinary problems because people loved what I was talking about. I was talking about the career of modeling. And then I also spoke in many English classes on how to go for a job interview. I mean, this is when it's in the senior school, like juniors and seniors. And I would say, this is how you have to appear. This is what you need to wear. This is how your hair needs to look. This is how you need to walk in. This is how you shake a hand. All of these things were part of what was called the charm school process, which is what we, of course, had. We had personal development as well as modeling. And I also, of course, it was interesting, taught, TV commercials because I had a talent agency that was SAG and AFTRA. So we did most of the commercials that came to South Florida. And so I taught them how to read for a commercial and how to use a product and how to keep a product in their hands and make sure the product was the primary focus and not them. But anyway, going back to the speaking, I really got my feet wet going into these public schools. And I would do really somewhere between, I would say, 3 to 5 schools a week. So you can imagine, I mean, if you're doing 3 to 5 schools a week,
you're getting a lot of experience. So that was my first real look at speaking in terms of getting in front of a group. And because of that, and because I was new to the area and I didn't know anybody, and newspapers were really big then, I would go through the newspapers and see who was holding luncheons and dinners and who had a speaker at each of these. And then I would find out who the contact was, the program director or the president or whomever, and I would call that person to see if I could get in as a speaker. And it took months because they were scheduled, some of them 3, 4, 5 months ahead, but at least many of them said yes. And so I started speaking to a lot of community groups. And what did I speak to them on? I spoke to them on grooming and appearance and the ability to make a first impression, and how important it was to be articulate and be able to speak well and have something to say and make good conversation. And that's really how I got started in professional speaking. So before I ever went into professional speaking, I had actually done 10,000 free speeches. Now think about that. 10,000 free speeches over a 20-year career is what I did. And that's how I got good. And I made a little bit of money, like if I went and I spoke at a convention or something, but it was basically, small change, $10 here, $15 there. It wasn't really money. And that's, I think, what you have to look at when you're thinking about being a speaker. Somebody gets an idea and says, hey, I think I'd like to be a professional speaker. Well, where have you spoken? What groups have you already been in front of? What was the reaction? Did they like what you had to say? Did they ask you a lot of questions at the end of the speech? Was there an opportunity to get a referral to another group that you spoke to because they loved you so much? So all of those things are things you need to look at and say, do I have the history to go into professional speaking? And that's very, very important. So that's how I got my start in speaking. And then, because I had this convention service company, which was a division of my other company, I booked speakers. And some of the speakers I booked, one was the first president of the National Speakers Association, who was Bill Gove. And I booked Bill a lot because he lived in the Palm Beach area, and he would come to the various programs in Miami and speak, and he was just fabulous. I mean, he was one of a kind. And then there was another fellow by the name of Sam Edwards, who I became very close to, and he was what's called a CPAE, which is the highest honor you can be awarded in speaking. And I would book him, and he was kind of the kind of person who was like a Foster Brooks. If he acted as if he was drunk, of course he wasn't, and he did a little comedy routine. Well, I became close to both of these fellows, and they each said to me, Gayle, you really should join the National Speakers Association. You're a better speaker than we are, which is, of course, not correct, but that's what they said to me. Well, I was so busy running the company, I had no time to go to a convention, and so I never did it, like for 3, 4, 5 years. And finally, especially Sam said to me, you have got to go. So I went. I actually went to the conference and learned that I could make a living as a professional speaker. Now, remember, this was back in 1980. It was a different time. It was a different way of doing things. But I went, and I became enamored by the fact that I could make a living at something that I loved doing, because I loved speaking. I loved getting up in front of a group and imparting knowledge and then getting recognized, not for me, but for the information I was giving them, because they got so much out of it. And literally, you're not going to believe this, but literally I came home and I said, I am going to be a speaker. I'm going to sell my business, which of course floored my husband, and I'm going to be a speaker. And of course, my husband, he was always a great supporter, but he really never understood what I did. And he said, what does that mean? I said, well, that's when you get up in front of a group and you speak. And he says, I hear you talk all the time. Who on earth would pay you to do that? Well, that's kind of how it was. And so I literally sold my company, and I was getting my doctorate at the same time. So I sold my company and decided I was going to be a professional speaker. Now, it took me 9 months to start a speaking career. And this is what it took. And you can't do this today because it's a different world. But at that time, I actually got on the phone and I called 100 meeting planners a day. Now, you don't reach 100, you reach about 33. And out of the 33 that I reached, I sent out 20 packets of information because that was the time where you didn't have a computer and everything was, you sent out your brochures and your one sheets and all the information you had. And out of those 20, I had 13 responses. And out of those 13 responses, I got an immediate, and when I say immediate, it means they said yes, but the event could be 6, 9, 10, a year out. I got 3 yeses. So within 9 months, I started doing 135 programs a year. And that's what I did for 20 years, 135 programs a year. So that means, and this is important for you to listen to, I used to leave my house on a Sunday or Monday and come back on a Friday. And that's what it was like. So, it's being away from your family and being away from your home and being away from everything for a long period of time. And during that 20-some years, I worked in 50 countries and 49 states. I had 1,000 clients in 50 industries, and it was really wonderful. And, of course, then I stopped once my husband got sick. But I can tell you that's what it took. Now, why would that not work today? Because meeting planners, some of them, and they're called now meeting professionals, they don't all do the bookings anymore. I mean, it's now at a senior VP level or something like that. And some of the planners, the professionals, do book, but not a lot of them. They're more logistically based now. Plus, nobody answers the telephone anymore. So it's much harder to get in touch with them. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy, and a lot of time. But it worked. So that's how I got started in speaking. I'm now a certified speaking professional, which is a lot of requirements that go into that. And there's not a whole lot of them in the world. Of all the speakers in the world, I don't think but 8% now are certified. So that's kind of interesting. But what does it take? What does it take to be a successful speaker? And that's what I know you're interested in. Well, first of all, you have to have something to say. And just because you think is relative and because you think it's important doesn't mean that there's an audience that wants to listen to you or will pay you for it. For example, when I work with new speakers, I'll say, well, okay, tell me what you talk about. Oh, I'm so passionate about making sure that people understand that. Well, that's great, but that doesn't translate to something that is important to the potential client. And you've got to figure, who is your client? Is it a corporation? Is it an association? Is it a community group? Is it a particular segment of the population? For example, only physicians or only women or only people who are data people or whatever it is. What is it that you have to say to that group that they are interested in and they would pay you for? Now, there's a big difference by going out and speaking, which I think is very important, by the way, to speak to your Rotaries and your Kiwanis and your business groups like that. But they don't normally pay you. It's a great place to get your feet wet, to understand what it is that you are going to talk about, smooth it out, see the questions that you get, tie the questions into points in your next speech that you can bring into because that's what they're interested in. They want to hear you talk about these things. That's why they brought you. But I can tell you that is not necessarily what will get you money. Now, why would I want to speak to a Rotary or why would I want to speak to a Kiwanis? Well, if I'm good, there are business people in there who either own their own company or work for a company. And they are the people who, for example, can bring you in and hire you. And I was just on a plane coming out to the West Coast and sat next to somebody who was high up in an organization. And we got to talking, and he said, well, what do you speak about? And when I told him, he said, we could probably use someone like you. Now, that is not, yes, you've got the job kind of thing. That's a, okay, I want to know more kind of thing. So it's up to me now to follow up and make sure that I have the information that is going to be right for his company. So what you need to really look at is, what do I have to say that nobody else is talking about, that this particular audience or segment or industry or whomever, they want to hear? And it's unique. It's different. It's not something that just makes me feel good. I mean, there are a lot of people who are passionate about wanting people to live a better life, a more productive life, a happier life, a life without stress. That's fine, but that's not tangible enough to bring into a corporation and have them pay you for it. It's got to be a lot more down to earth and tangible. If I'm teaching leadership, what is it that I can say about leadership that will make it different than anybody else who talks about leadership? And why should they look at me and say, yeah, that's really good? So it's not easy, because there's a lot of competition out there. And if you want to do well and get paid well, then you have to have something important to say. Now, what does this mean? This means that you've got to look a certain way. You've got to speak a certain way. You've got to tie in tangible examples. It might mean if there's a crisis that morning that you are talking about, you're going to be on at 9 o'clock and at 7 o'clock news breaks. You need to be aware of it if you can tie it in and make it relevant. That way people know that you're current, that you watch the news, that you are aware of what's going on in the world. Now, you don't have to be antagonistic. We don't necessarily want that. But you need to be knowledgeable. And if it really enhances your speech by you tweaking it and bringing it up to speed, that's important. And you also need to practice. I always talk about practicing. And, it's so easy today. You can record yourself on your cell phone. Let me tell you what happens when you do that. You just want to crawl into a wall somewhere. Nobody likes to see themselves on video. They just, they say, oh, that's not me. That doesn't sound like me. I didn't really do that. I used to use a lot of video when I did role playing, because we did role plays when I went into companies, because it brought conflict resolution into it, and I worked a lot in that area. And people would say, no, I didn't do that. And then I showed them the video, and there they were. The hands were going. They were playing with their jewelry or with the hair. And if it was a guy, he was jangling money in his pocket, or things like that. And that's nervousness. And so it's really interesting what is captured on video, on film, that you don't even know you're doing. And that is a part of it. So that's why when you're doing your speech, which you're rehearsing over and over and over again, that is why you video yourself. And that's how you get better and better and better. And I don't know. I mean, I know I don't ever like to watch myself on video. I don't know if you ever get good enough that you say, wow, I am absolutely thrilled with that performance, because, all of us are trying to get better. But I would suggest that you do that, and that is one way that you can prepare yourself and get better. I would also, and this is humiliating when you have to do this, but I would even invite speaker friends to come and listen to me and give you a critique, because they're looking at things that you aren't looking at. They're watching the audience. They're seeing the impact. They can hear what has an effect on them, and when they tune out. And let me tell you something else that never happened when I was speaking, because it didn't exist. It exists now, but it didn't exist when I was doing all those programs. People are on their cell phones, and they're texting, and they're reading their email. And guess what else they're doing? They are texting someone else at the conference saying, don't come in, she's terrible. Don't come in, he's boring. Don't come in, because this is all old news. They do that. And you're thinking to yourself, oh, no. But yes, they do that. So, I mean, this is something that is really, really important because I had a friend and he was telling me this story where he was told to speak about one thing, but because the particular workshop didn't have enough signups, they brought an entirely new audience in, but they never told him. And so when he was talking, and he was talking about technical things, and half the audience was like zoning out and saying, oh, this guy is a loser, he doesn't know anything new, blah, blah, blah. And the others were frantically writing things down. And so he said to the person who hired him afterwards, what happened? I mean, the audience has never had this kind of a reaction. Well, then the guy told him that he had brought in all these young people from college. It was supposed to be training on something, technical. And these kids knew it all. I mean, they were not beginners. They had been brought up on tablets and other technical things. So they knew all of this stuff, and they came in thinking they were going to learn something new, and of course they didn't. The other part of the audience was more adult, older, and they were thinking this was the greatest thing since pizza. So, it wasn't his fault. He was told one thing, and then the planner or the person who hired him never told him about the other audience. But this happens. I mean, and you have to be able to be aware of it. People are texting while you are speaking. This is very discourteous. This is not good, but it happens all day long, and you need to be aware of it. So these are all things that, they were just not around when I started out. But you have to do that, and it isn't just because you're good, you're going to get booked. It isn't just because people know you, you're going to get booked. You have to have a subject that is different from everybody else that's doing what you do. You have to have the right subject for the right audience. You have to be, I would say today, when you are starting out, you're probably one of 50 or 100 people they're considering. And, I know some of you think, well, I can get a speakers bureau or I can get an agent. No, you can't. Until your speaker bureau gets the request for you a half a dozen times. Do you know Gayle Carson? Have you heard her speak? I really want Gayle Carson. That's when Gayle Carson is going to be represented by a speakers bureau and not before. So you're going to have to do this all on your own, or you can hire a virtual assistant to help you. But, of course, that's an expense, but you're going to have to take that expense in the beginning unless you want to do it yourself. And most people hate to sell. And let me tell you, I don't care how great a speaker you are, you're in the marketing business. You have got to market yourself all the time. And what happens is speakers, when they do start to get busy, they stop marketing because they're on the road and they can't do it. And then when they come home to an empty calendar and they've got to start all over again, there's a gap because things are not happening, tomorrow. I will tell you, they are booking now shorter term. When I started, they booked, 9 to 12 months out. Now they could book you in 30 days or they could book you still 9 months, but it's getting shorter and shorter time frame. But there is more and more competition. So, I know that this is not necessarily what you want to hear, but I really think the first place for you to start, if you want to be a speaker, is just to get out there and speak, whether it be to Rotaries or Kiwanis or community groups or the PTA or whomever. Get out there and speak. Get the feedback. Get people who are in your corner and would be your champion and who might know people and who might recommend you. Fine-tune your message. See what really clicks with people. See the results that happen. Follow up. See, if there's a difference. I mean, we all, yes, we're going to change, but then something happens and we're back to our old selves again. So that's all the things that you need to think about. And, if I can help you in any way, I want you to be in touch with me. My website is spunkyoldbroad.com. You can email me at Gayle, that's Gayle, Carson13 @gmail.com. to ask me any question that you would like that would help you, because I just love speaking, and I think it's wonderful. And I now, I've certainly stopped speaking 135 times a year because I just don't want to be gone that much. I don't want to travel that much anymore. And, I've got my pets and I don't want to leave them. And so and I'm alone, I live alone. So it's a different world now than it was when I had my husband, when I had the kids home, all of that. So I want to wish you the best. And again, I really sincerely mean it. If you need to question me or you want to know more about the speaking profession, just get in touch with me, or you can go to the nsaspeaker.org. That's a national organization, and many of you will have chapters in your particular area. So I want to wish you the best. I hope this helped you, and I'll look forward to speaking with you again.